In the late Ming dynasty, the empire was a vast land of silk, tea, and endless hierarchies. Amid shifting loyalties and corruption, a ruler rose who valued discipline over affection, Emperor Liang Xuan, the son of precision. His rise to power came after years of civil disorder, where regional governors had turned their provinces into private kingdoms. Liang, once a scholar of ethics and mathematics, promised to restore balance through strict governance. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss more chilling tales from history's darkest corners. Before ascending the throne, Liang was known for his mastery of Confucian doctrine and his obsession with systems. He believed everything, from taxation to morality, could be ordered through measurable patterns. When his predecessor died without a clear heir, Liang presented not charisma but logic. He claimed that reason, not blood, granted the right to rule. The imperial court, exhausted by chaos, accepted his argument. His early reign brought impressive reforms. He standardized coin weights, reorganized provincial audits, and restructured the bureaucracy to reduce hereditary corruption. Farmers began receiving fairer grain prices under his new tax code. For a brief time, citizens saw him as a philosopher king. But as his reforms deepened, so did his obsession with purity, both moral and political. Liang believed that the empire's decay came not from war or famine, but from deceit. Poisoning, in particular, became his greatest fear. In court politics, poison was silent and effective. Ministers had fallen mysteriously ill for years, and rumor said even his father's death had been caused by tainted wine. Liang resolved to end such hidden treachery forever. To him, the antidote to secret sin was public pain. He established a Bureau of Internal Purity, granting it powers to investigate any official, noble, or servant suspected of deceit. The Bureau's symbol was the peony, a flower associated with beauty and death. Under Liang's directive, every investigation ended in meticulous reports, cross-referenced testimonies, and moral evaluations. Those accused of deception faced not immediate execution, but interrogation designed to extract confession through physical precision. Despite his severity, Liang was not impulsive. He did not act from rage but from calculation. He saw punishment as a necessary instrument of order, an equation balancing wrongdoing with correction. He often said in court records, "A kingdom does not fall from famine, it falls from falsehood." This belief shaped his entire judicial philosophy and the punishments that followed. The emperor lived a regimented life. He woke at dawn, recited administrative maxims, inspected grain ledgers, and spent hours studying plant toxins collected from his imperial gardens. Scholars said his botanical knowledge surpassed that of many physicians. He believed nature mirrored human nature, both capable of nourishment and destruction depending on intent. His fascination with plants would soon merge with his vision of justice. Under his rule, the empire flourished economically, but the atmosphere grew tense. Informants multiplied, and families whispered before speaking. Ministers no longer plotted, but feared being accused of plotting. Poisonings indeed decreased, but so did trust. Liang viewed this fear as proof of his success. The absence of comfort, he claimed, meant the presence of control. Emperor Liang's palace reflected his philosophy. Gardens stretched for acres, arranged not for pleasure, but for discipline. Every tree was pruned in geometric alignment. Roses, chrysanthemums, and thorned vines were cultivated not only for their fragrance, but for their symbolism. He once wrote, "A rose is beautiful because it bleeds." Courtiers often avoided the garden paths, for they were said to represent punishment disguised as elegance. Liang's personal attendants noted his fascination with the duality of beauty and pain. He would observe thorned branches under morning dew, tracing the lines where stem met thorn. To him, such designs were evidence of divine logic, the natural punishment hidden within attraction. Records from his personal writings suggest he began sketching ideas for what he called the Garden of Thorns, a concept merging botanical harmony with judicial consequence. The emperor's perception of justice grew increasingly intertwined with ritual. Executions became public lessons, intended not to terrify, but to educate. Each method of punishment was catalogued in imperial archives, paired with a moral explanation. To Liang, the act of dying for deceit had to mirror the deceit itself. A poisoner, he reasoned, must perish through the slow unveiling of their own hidden toxins. This notion became the foundation for one of China's most intricate and painful punishments. While historians later condemned him as cruel, contemporaries saw Liang as consistent. His punishments were severe but predictable. He did not torture randomly, he followed structure. Records describe him as calm, even during executions, never shouting or displaying anger. He considered emotion an imperfection in governance. Justice, he believed, must be neither merciful nor vengeful, only balanced. Foreign envoys often returned with conflicting impressions. Some admired his reforms and infrastructure. Others whispered that his empire resembled a silent garden, orderly, fragrant, but full of unseen thorns. Liang rarely entertained foreign criticism. He viewed outsiders as chaotic forces, unworthy of influencing the empire's inner harmony. His focus remained internal, directed toward the roots of deceit within his own court. As the years passed, Emperor Liang's fixation deepened. The Bureau of Internal Purity reported directly to him, bypassing traditional ministries. Secret investigations spread across the empire, targeting not just poisoners, but those accused of falsehood in any form, lying under oath, concealing taxes, or distorting trade reports. The line between criminal and flawed citizen began to fade. Among his scholars, one in particular shared the emperor's scientific approach to truth, Minister Zhao Han, an expert in medicinal herbs and chemical compounds. Together, they studied venomous flora from the southern provinces. Their collaboration aimed to identify poisons that left visible traces on the skin. They believed that visibility purified guilt, transforming invisible crimes into observable justice. By the 10th year of Liang's reign, his palace gardens had evolved into experimental grounds. Botanists worked alongside alchemists, cultivating plants capable of both healing and harming. The emperor often supervised these studies himself, recording how the human body reacted to contact with different thorns, saps, and oils. His goal was not to invent pain for its own sake, but to create punishment that mirrored nature's symmetry. Court physicians began to grow uneasy. The emperor's curiosity was no longer confined to medicine or philosophy. He spoke often of poetic justice, of beauty containing retribution. Rumors spread that he planned to reform execution itself, to make it an art of moral precision. Few dared question him, for questioning implied disloyalty, and disloyalty invited suspicion. By the 12th year, the Bureau recorded a decline in poisoning cases. To Liang, this confirmed his method's success, yet his advisors noticed his growing isolation. He dined alone, refused concubines, and spent evenings in the rose gardens, walking among vines arranged like living labyrinths. Servants claimed he spoke softly to the plants, reciting laws as if teaching them the structure of governance. It was during one of these solitary walks that he conceived his most infamous decree, a punishment reserved for those who sought to kill through poison. The decree described a ceremony that blended nature and justice, pain and fragrance. He called it the punishment of petals. To him, it symbolized the empire's ultimate harmony, beauty enforcing truth. And in that moment, the Garden of Thorns began to take shape, not as a myth, but as the emperor's living instrument of order. When Emperor Liang Xuan first conceived the Garden of Thorns, it was not intended as a spectacle, but as an extension of his philosophy. He believed that punishment should reflect the crime, not through brute force, but through natural correspondence. Poisoners used beauty as their weapon, rare herbs, delicate liquids, fragrant cups of tea. Therefore, he decided that their punishment must emerge from beauty as well. A flower would correct what a flower had corrupted. The emperor summoned Minister Zhao Han to the Hall of Purity and described his idea in precise terms. The punishment must expose deceit as nature exposes decay. Zhao listened carefully, then suggested using thorned vines from the southern provinces. These vines, when soaked in certain saps, released mild toxins that caused swelling and bleeding upon contact. Liang found the idea appropriate. Pain from the plant itself, he reasoned, was more symbolic than pain caused by man's invention. A secluded section of the imperial gardens was converted into the Chamber of Petals. Tall bamboo screens surrounded the area, ensuring silence and secrecy. Within the enclosure, gardeners planted roses, wild vines, and species of thorned shrubs imported from Yunnan and Fujian. The space was arranged geometrically, forming a circular path lined with symmetrical hedges. Each plant was chosen for its balance of color, scent, and danger. The emperor personally inspected every section. Quick reminder, if you are enjoying, do like the video and subscribe the channel for upcoming historical content. The process of execution was codified in the Bureau's archives. A person convicted of poisoning would be stripped of all rank and possessions. Their body would be washed to remove impurities, symbolizing the empire's cleansing of deceit. Then, vine branches soaked in herbal sap would be wrapped around the body from shoulders to ankles. Officials noted that the vine's small thorns pierced the skin evenly, allowing poison to enter slowly. The condemned would then be rolled across the garden path, guided by attendants wearing thick leather gloves. This punishment was not designed for speed. Death came gradually through the combination of cuts and plant toxins. Witnesses described the process as methodical, almost ceremonial. Each step was recorded by scribes, ensuring that no unnecessary cruelty occurred beyond the prescribed limits. Liang emphasized that the punishment was not vengeance but purification, the empire removing infection from within. Minister Zhao maintained that the punishment held medical logic. The toxins used were mild but cumulative. They caused convulsions, loss of sensation, and finally paralysis. The final stage, often after several hours, was circulatory failure. Physicians who observed these deaths described them clinically, avoiding emotional language. In official records, the punishment was classified not as torture, but as moral correction through organic means. The emperor watched the first execution personally. It involved a palace servant who had confessed to poisoning a cup of wine meant for a concubine. The servant was calm, accepting his fate. As the vines were wrapped, he murmured a prayer for forgiveness. Liang ordered the attendants to proceed without haste. He stood silently, his hands clasped behind his back, observing how the thorns left uniform patterns across the servant's skin. When it was over, he instructed the Bureau to collect notes on the effects and make adjustments for balance and consistency. Over time, the punishment became both feared and studied. Scholars in the Bureau wrote treatises analyzing its efficiency and symbolic meaning. They argued that the combination of beauty, poison, and symmetry demonstrated the empire's commitment to moral order. Foreign envoys who learned of it from whispers in the court described it as a philosopher's execution, more like a ritual experiment than a judicial act. The emperor insisted that the punishment not be used frequently. He declared that rarity enhanced its meaning. It was reserved for those who used poison to harm, not for ordinary crimes. In nearly 2 decades of his reign, historical sources record fewer than 24 instances. Each one followed strict ceremonial procedure, with precise documentation. Liang reviewed these records personally, annotating margins with corrections and philosophical commentary. Yet as the years passed, the emperor's detachment from human emotion deepened. To him, the condemned were not people, but variables in a formula of justice. The suffering in the garden was no longer an act of morality, but an experiment in control. Ministers who once admired his intellect began to fear his coldness. Whispers circulated that he found solace only among the roses and vines he had weaponized. The Chamber of Petals grew more elaborate. New varieties of plants were added, species known to cause mild paralysis or hallucinatory effects. The vines were carefully cultivated under imperial supervision. Court gardeners followed written manuals detailing how to maintain thorn sharpness and sap potency. The garden became both botanical laboratory and execution ground. Its silence held a sense of precision, not cruelty. For Emperor Liang, the garden symbolized his greatest success. It combined philosophy, science, and justice into a single entity. He often told his scribes that humanity's greatest flaw was the illusion of separation, that beauty and punishment, pleasure and pain were parts of the same design. The garden, he claimed, proved that harmony could exist even in death. His writings during this period reveal no trace of doubt. But beyond the palace walls, the empire's perception of the emperor began to shift. Farmers who once praised his fairness now feared his inspection officers. Scholars who once studied his reforms began destroying notes mentioning the Bureau of Internal Purity. Even the most loyal officials avoided presenting bad news, fearing their words might be seen as deceit. The empire functioned smoothly, but under silence rather than stability. Minister Zhao, once his closest confidant, grew increasingly uneasy. He noticed the emperor's growing tendency to use the punishment for moral offenses rather than poison-related crimes. Servants accused of lying, merchants accused of concealing weight, even minor officials suspected of disloyalty. All risked the vines. Zhao tried to reason that moral decay could not be cured by physical pain, but Liang dismissed him. He said truth required exposure, and pain was nature's form of exposure. As Zhao's doubts grew, so did the emperor's mistrust. The bureau began investigating Zhao's subordinates for inconsistencies in their reports. One by one, Zhao's assistants vanished, summoned to purification. The minister realized that the garden he helped design had become a symbol of imperial paranoia, yet he dared not confront Liang directly. To question the punishment was to question order itself. In private correspondence later found in preserved archives, Zhao described the emperor as a man who had turned reason into religion. He wrote that Liang no longer saw distinction between governance and anatomy, between empire and organism. He believes deceit is a disease of the flesh, Zhao wrote, and he treats his subjects as the body he must cleanse. By the 20th year of his reign, the garden had claimed the lives of nobles, scholars, and servants alike. The vines continued to grow thicker, nourished by the soil beneath the bamboo screens. No one outside the palace knew exactly where the Chamber of Petals stood. Its location was omitted from maps, guarded by silence and superstition. Yet the name, the Garden of Thorns, spread through the empire as a whisper of fear. Emperor Liang spent his evenings walking the garden paths, inspecting the vines by lantern light. He believed the roses had become more vibrant over the years. To him, this was proof that justice strengthened nature. The flowers bloomed as the empire purified itself. The irony escaped him that those same roots were fed by the remains of the condemned. Minister Zhao, by then an old man, could sense the empire's quiet unrest. He knew that such precision could not sustain itself forever. Order built on fear was not stability, but suspension. Yet the emperor refused to see the difference. He had created a world without deception, but also without trust. And within that perfect stillness, the first signs of his downfall began to take root. Though Liang Xuan, ruler of harmony, had not yet noticed that the thorns he planted were beginning to turn inward. By the 22nd year of Emperor Liang Xuan's reign, silence had replaced loyalty. Ministers spoke less, scholars censored themselves, and citizens obeyed without conviction. The empire still functioned, taxes were paid, crops were harvested, records were kept, but its pulse had slowed. What had begun as a system of balance had become an organism of fear. Minister Zhao Han, the last remaining founder of the Bureau of Internal Purity, resigned under the pretext of illness. Before leaving the court, he sent one final letter to the emperor, warning that when fear replaces respect, decay begins from within. Liang read the letter carefully, then burned it. He believed Zhao's words reflected weakness, not wisdom. Soon after, rumors reached the emperor that members of the bureau had falsified confessions to impress him. He ordered a secret inquiry, but every official implicated another, each confession crafted to survive another day. Within months, the bureau collapsed under its own contradictions. The machine built to detect deceit had devoured itself. Determined to restore order, Liang decided to reopen the Chamber of Petals for investigation. He would prove that truth could still bloom through pain. The first suspect was a young official accused of manipulating evidence. During questioning, the man pleaded innocence and swore by the emperor's reforms. When the vines touched his skin, he screamed that the poison was not his crime, but the emperor's. Those words, echoing through the bamboo walls, unsettled Liang for the first time. That night he walked alone through the garden. The roses glowed faintly under the lanterns, their petals redder than before. The vines had grown dense, their roots thick with age. He ran his fingers across a branch, tracing the thorns as he had in his youth. One thorn pierced his skin. The cut was shallow, but it bled freely. The emperor paused, staring at the drop of blood on his fingertip. For the first time, the garden responded to him not as master, but as participant. Within days, the wound on his finger darkened. Court physicians noticed swelling, then fever. They applied herbal ointments, but none worked. The toxins from the vine, the same ones he had chosen years ago, had entered his bloodstream. Liang refused to acknowledge the irony. He insisted the infection was divine testing. Yet as his condition worsened, his clarity faded. Emperor Liang Xuan died within the garden he had built to perfect justice, a ruler consumed by the very balance he had sought to preserve. The Chamber of Petals was sealed thereafter, its location lost to time.